Well, what are we to make of this hotel quarantine fiasco if you can't learn from over 800 deaths in Victoria? We've had an inquiry into all of this. All it did was prove that only a mug would trust the hotel quarantine system. And never forget, 90% of all coronavirus deaths in this country are in Victoria. One of the stumbling blocks may well be the comments by the Prime Minister on Friday. Firstly, he ruled out the federal government taking over hotel quarantine when he said, quote, hotel quarantine is never 100% fail-safe, and to suggest it will ever be is not realistic. Christina Keneally, the federal opposition Home Affairs spokeswoman, has said the current hotel quarantine system run by the states was unsustainable and a national scheme was needed. Well, the next national cabinet meeting is not due until mid-March. Quite frankly, I wish they'd abolish them. But the reality is the breakouts in Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland and WA have been sourced to quarantine. For Daniel Andrews to be talking about a radical shake-up of Australia's international arrivals policy and letting fewer stranded Australians into the country is, put simply, totally un-Australian. The current quarantine system is not sustainable. Both of these issues are urgent matters of public policy. The first is hotel quarantine. The second, which we'll look at tomorrow night, is what in all conscience do we do with 40,000 Australians, perhaps there are more, who surely are entitled to return to their country of birth, whether it be for compassionate grounds or simply because they're Australians. But firstly, to the West Australian President of the AMA, Dr Andrew Miller, who says the existing hotel quarantine system is unacceptable and branding it hotel quarantine as an oxymoron. Now, an oxymoron is a figure of speech in which contradictory terms appear beside one another. Hotel quarantine. Deafening silence is an oxymoron. The poet William Butler Yeats talked about terrible beauty. Shakespeare said parting is such sweet sorrow. Hotel quarantine. Dr Andrew Miller is on the line. Dr Miller, thank you for your time. Congratulations on your comments because, as you rightly say, this is the path of least resistance, seeking to avoid cost and inconvenience and yet creating both.
Yes, well, it's good to be with you, Alan, and good to talk about the oxymoron of hotel quarantine. I think that it was okay as an emergency measure. We can understand we had to throw things together last year in a bit of a hurry, but we have a responsibility, as you say, not just to our own citizens, but who are here being protected by quarantine, but also those who have every right to expect that the government will organise them to come home, that we will offer a safe and humane quarantine system. And that's not what we're providing at the moment.
No, I mean, what we've got, as you've said, I mean, death and personal, emotional and psychological costs of lockdown, business failures. I can't help think, Doctor, the emotional trauma of thousands of couples who couldn't marry at the weekend. Now, one of the issues here that you've alluded to is airborne transmissions. And the reality is hotel systems are not designed, are they, to generate the kind of airflow turnover needed to minimise the risk of aerosol transmission.
Well, that's exactly right. And they're in fact quite stuffy buildings. And I think all of us who've spent much time staying in hotels will know what a relief it is to get outside occasionally and away from the recycled air. And I can only feel for the low-paid workers who are stuck in a hallway somewhere without proper PPE or ventilation, and for the other guests who are staying there, the sort of fear that must go through their mind when they don't know who's staying in the room next to them or just down the hallway, or the fear that they might have it themselves and give it to somebody else because of lack of protection from airborne spread.
But see, Doc, what advice is the Prime Minister Morrison getting? He says, we listen to the experts. He's defending hotel quarantine. Now, it's indefensible, really. You've talked about greenfield sites. Now, I understand the government were contemplating a proposal in Toowoomba. I mean, the opposition to that is overwhelming. The medical community there who've spoken to me say hospitals there are already understaffed and ill-equipped to handle an outbreak. The local federal member, a new bloke called Garth Hamilton, has responded to deputations to him. He says no. The business community says no. Clive Berghofer, one of the kings of Toowoomba, carrying huge respect, says no. But why, Dr Miller, would you build a quarantine centre in a place that's freezing cold in winter with heavy fogs right across the region? The virus loves cold and damp conditions, and that's why it's burning up the Northern Hemisphere in winter right now, and that's why it's working so well in Howard Springs in the Northern Territory, where it's hot and dry. I mean, there are plenty of medical experts who agree that putting a quarantine facility in a cold, damp environment like Toowoomba in wintertime is utter madness. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the greenfield sites are a bit off in the never, never. I don't think we're going to get to that anytime soon because of the various conflicting opinions. What we need to do is have the Federal Infection Control Experts Group just accept that this is an aerosol spread virus. That's been leading the politicians astray. You can't expect that the politicians are going to be experts here. They have to rely on medical advice, and there's a mountain of medical advice now saying that this is travelling through the air in these hotels. We have to just retro.
So what are you saying? I mean, given you're saying that this is in the never, never, we're talking about the here and now. Does something have to be done, therefore, to change the airflow structures of these hotels?
And I'm told that it's not that hard by the air conditioning experts, and they haven't been called in yet, unfortunately. There's people called occupational hygienists, and there's aerosol scientists, and there's even, very sophisticated air conditioning engineers who've been offering their help for the last 12 months. And they've been rebuffed because some of these government bureaucrats like to keep control and power unto themselves, as I'm sure you know. So I think that it's important that we look at the facilities we have, upgrade the ones we can, get rid of the ones that we can't, and give the people who work in there either an opportunity to do things like remote surveillance. Cameras can't be that hard. You can get them at JB Hi-Fi. And give them some respirator-type masks, as you would see in most countries that take this threat really seriously.
I mean, you can't solve a problem if you don't admit there is a problem. Now, you are saying, and many people I have read at the weekend, that these systems in hotels are not designed to generate the kind of airflow turnover to minimise the risk of aerosol transmission. And it's more important with the virus strains coming out of Britain, South Africa and Brazil. How easy is it to change a hotel ventilation system?
Well, they tell me in some cases it may be as simple as cracking open the windows, doing it in a safe fashion, put a grill in there or something so people can't climb out. But in a lot of instances, it's not much more complicated than what Florence Nightingale did when she designed the Nightingale wards, which was have lots of airflow go through them to keep that TB out of there.
So, I read an epidemiologist at the weekend saying that any facility used for quarantine should have at least 10 airflow changes an hour, and they should be located in regional areas or on the edge of the CBD, not the CBD. What do you think?
Look, I think that's where we've got to get to, but the stepping stones to get there is first pack everybody in a decent N95 mask. We can do that tomorrow.
Well, it's great to talk to you. We can do it tomorrow, I know, but you can't tell people who don't want to listen to you, can you? It's good to talk to you.
There are none so deaf. None so deaf, Alan. I was pleased to share my terrible beauty with you this evening.
Yeah,
thank you.
You look sensational. Make sure you look after them when the interview is over. There he is, Dr. Miller, the WA President of the AMA.